All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Trevor Timm. Trevor is an activist for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, as well as the co-founder and executive director of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, which you can find at pressfreedomfoundation.org. You can also find him on Twitter at Trevor Timm. Trevor, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
All right, so Trevor, you recently wrote about the hypocrisy of the government attacking Edward Snowden for the NSA leaks by actually leaking information themselves. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Right. It's been interesting to see how the government has claimed that leaks are so damaging to national security and nobody should ever leak. And, there was a report in McClatchy newspapers, a really important report, actually, from 2 weeks ago, describing the Obama administration's insider threat program, which basically equates all leaks with aiding the enemy. And this has permeated not into just agencies that deal with classified information, but agencies like the Peace Corps and the Department of Agriculture and Department of Education. And it's really been disturbing to see how they have decided to treat leaks within the government. I mean, obviously, leaks have always been frowned upon, but people have been rarely prosecuted for them. The Obama administration has now has attempted to prosecute 7 under the Espionage Act since Obama was inaugurated in 2009, whereas all other administrations combined have prosecuted 3. So this is all the backdrop for all of their comments about Edward Snowden and how he never should, he's betraying the country by leaking this information about how the NSA has been surveilling millions of Americans without any probable cause or even relevance to any sort of investigation. But they have gone about this by actually leaking more classified information. So their idea of showing how dangerous classified information is, their solution is to leak more. There was a myriad stories in the last week about how terrorists are allegedly changing their tactics to communicate with, who they need to communicate with now that they know.
Because terrorists clearly didn't know that the U.S. was trying to find their communications. That was something they're like, what? They're trying to find our communications? I'm shocked. I'm sure every terrorist all around the world was just shocked to find this information.
Right. Like these terrorist masterminds are so smart that we have to, upend our Constitution to defeat them. Yet they're so dumb that they just found out we were reading their emails last week. It's absurd. It's absurd on both counts. But terrorists have known for a decade or more that the U.S. has these capabilities, and a lot of the reports actually push back on the government claims a little bit, showing that the terrorists have often tried to conceal their communications through encryption and other means. So the idea that they didn't know that the government was could surveil Facebook or Gmail or even Skype is their favorite example is kind of absurd. But this isn't the only leak that the government has kind of implemented against Edward Snowden. So, just to be clear, these leaks were coming from intelligence officials. They were talking about, sensitive information about how terrorists communicate, and so this stuff is naturally classified. Yet they're leaking it to the media to prove their own points. And so, but this wasn't the only type leak that was used against Edward Snowden. The State Department it was illegal for them to leak anything about revoking Edward Snowden's passport because of the Privacy Act. Yet, officials wouldn't talk on the record about it, but dozens of reports referred to unnamed officials which talked about how his passport had been revoked. Even the criminal complaint against him from a few weeks ago when it first came out was leaked to the Washington Post. It was actually sealed by the court, and it was illegal for anybody to talk about, but it still managed to make its way into the papers. So, this is just a pattern that we've seen again and again where the administration, on one hand, is saying that leaks are terrible, nobody should ever leak to justify their own opinions, and then, on the other hand, they're going out and leaking all sorts of information themselves. So it's really hypocritical.
Absolutely. And again, the whole idea, again, of charging Edward Snowden under the Espionage Act is, again, one of those things that, and the fact that, again, like you mentioned, how the Obama administration has done it more than any other administration. I mean, there is no conceivable way you can look at Edward Snowden and not see that he is clearly a whistleblower, and you know, and you know, maybe you can prosecute him under different types of things, but to prosecute him under the Espionage Act is ridiculous and absurd.
Right. It's a real shame that these leakers have been charged under a statute which is basically akin to committing treason. Yet, their motives and methods for releasing information are obviously entirely different than traitors or any people of that sort. You know, Edward Snowden could have sold this information for millions of dollars to foreign governments that are hostile to the United States, but that wasn't his intent at all. Instead, he wanted to get this information to the public, to the American public, through journalists so that they could learn about what their government is doing under their name without them knowing. And, you know, that is basically the definition of a whistleblower. And, you know, with these secret programs, a lot of times, especially with the NSA surveillance program, all sorts of traditional avenues of transparency have been cut off, whether we're talking about the federal courts, where the government has steadfastly refused to admit or deny anything and claim state secrets privilege on a variety of lawsuits, including EFF's lawsuit against the warrantless surveillance program. You know, in Congress, they've stifled all sorts of transparency and oversight amendments. You know, just 6 months ago, they renewed the FISA Amendments Act. There were really modest, minor amendments that Ron Wyden and a few other senators proposed. They wouldn't have dismantled the program anyway. They just would have provided a little more transparency to show how Americans' privacy was being affected. But those, again, were all voted down. You know, it's just interesting to see that, you know, the president has said, well, let's have a debate about this in the country. Well, you know, we've been trying to have a debate in this country about this in Congress and the courts for years now, and the government has systematically stifled that debate. So these leaks have really given us the opportunity to understand what this program is doing, and for the first time, the American public has an idea about what's going on and actually can make some informed decisions about whether they want this to continue or not.